The ASUS ROG NUC is the new Intel NUC Enthusiast mini PC, a project carried over from Intel, and the design definitely has some familiar fingerprints from the NUC team. It's closest to Intel's NUC 11 Enthusiast Phantom Canyon, which was probably my favorite mini PC ever made. And while it shares a bunch of similarities, the ASUS ROG NUC is a different beast entirely, and we're going to go through it right after this short message. The EaseUS RecExperts screen recorder is an all-in-one solution for recording everything on your screen, whether it's online meetings, gameplay, tutorials, and more. RecExperts supports 4K and 60 FPS in various video formats, and there are plenty of additional features, including a simple video editor to clean up your recording. Give it a test run with a link in the video description. The first thing that struck me like a bolt of lightning is the ROG NUC size. With a volume of 2.5 litres, it's almost double the 1.3 litre NUC 11 Enthusiast. And there's a reason for that. The ROG NUC has much beefier hardware specs. There are two SKUs available, with only the difference between the two being that the ROG NUC 760 has Intel's latest Core Ultra 7 processor paired with an RTX 4060 laptop GPU, while the NUC 970 ups it to the Core Ultra 9 and RTX 4070. The size, ports, and everything else stays the same. ASUS sent me a loan unit of the top 970 model to have a squiz at, and I've spent quite a bit of time messing around with it. The design is similar to previous Intel efforts, just a bigger version of it, with one side featuring the addressable RGB logo, which you can mess around with using the ASUS Armory crate. You can also change the ROG logo with the included blank masks and make your own. The bottom side features the two sizable blowers. Yep, that's right, still blowers instead of fans. And just like previous models, you can place it horizontally or vertically thanks to the new chunky metal stand, which is really nice. The box itself is completely made of plastic as all previous gaming units. It doesn't feel completely solid either, with a little plastic creaking on the logo side when you press it in certain areas. But this one is heavy at 2.5 kilos or 5.5 pounds. In the box, you'll find the spare masks, a large 330 watt power brick, vertical stand, and power cord. No, unfortunately you can't VESA mount this one. So as mentioned earlier, the ROG NUC 970 comes with an Intel Core Ultra 9 185H. That's a 16 core, 22 thread processor with ARC integrated graphics. The Nvidia RTX 4070 laptop GPU only comes with 8GB of VRAM. Wow, that's only 2GB more than the NUC 11 Enthusiast with the RTX 2060, which released in January 2021. The price for this specific 970 model with a 1TB Gen 4 NVMe drive and 32GB of DDR5 5600 SODIMM memory is $2,200 US, according to the official website. While there's no official pricing in Australia just yet, that price converts to 3,300 Aussie dineros, which is, for a lack of a more interesting word, expensive. You're definitely paying for a one-of-a-kind custom mini PC design. For such a sizable mini, there are less ports than I expected. All four of the USB 3 ports are 10GB, and the SD card reader returns. The back has just one Thunderbolt 4, which connects directly to the ARC integrated graphics. Two DisplayPort 1.4a and HDMI 2.1 FRL are also available for the RTX 4070. So, 4 displays natively. Networking is handled by an Intel 2.5GB LAN jack and killer Wi-Fi 6E for wireless. I only started recently testing the Bluetooth range using an audio speaker, and the ROG NUC has the longest of any mini so far, at almost 7.5 meters with a wall in between, or 24 feet. By the way, that's also with the NUC standing vertically, which is how all my testing was done. You can upgrade the ROG NUC with more memory or storage. To open it, slide the latch on the rear to the side. Pull off the cover and remove the screw on the I/O side. Pull on the top section to release it and flip it over while watching out for the cable. Inside are 3 Gen 4 M.2 slots with one populated by the OS drive bundled with the Mini. Maximum DDR5 support is currently 64GB if you want to go all out. The website mentions that the latest Ubuntu is supported, so let's check it out. I'm running the latest 24.04 off a USB and it's A-OK. Otherwise, Windows 11 Pro was included with this review unit. The ASUS ROG NUC has 3 different power modes: Silent, Performance, and Turbo. These can be set at the BIOS level or using the Armoury Crate software, or you can use the Windows power mode, which seems to be Turbo when I compared the benchmarks. Performance and Turbo are supposed to allow higher power limits in exchange for better performance and higher fan noise, but I'm not convinced it worked as intended with this review unit, as benchmark scores were very similar between all 3 modes. I tested it through the BIOS and Armoury Crate, and even updated the BIOS. Anyway, I'm going to include the results of all 3 in the benchmarks, until I realized there was no further point testing them as the differences were so small. I've got a selection of scores from gaming minis I've done in the past for many of the benchmarks, and I've also added AMD's Ryzen 8945HS with integrated graphics out of curiosity to see how it holds up against the Core Ultra 9. Alright, let's get cracking. Not a huge increase in single core over the NUC 12 Enthusiast in Cinebench, around 8%. Multi-core changes that. This time it's up by a nice 23%. As you can see, the Geekbench scores were all over the place, which made me question the power modes. I spent a good few hours testing, and sometimes silent mode came out on top. Go figure. Anyway, according to Geekbench, the Ultra 9 is not so impressive against an 8945HS. Also, since when does Intel lose out in single core? The H.264 software encode has the ROG NUC out in front as you'd hope from a new generation. AV1 is another new entry into the benchmarks, and the ROG wins in both software and hardware encoding using Nvidia's NVENC encoder. It's supposed to be better than Intel's QuickSync, so that's why I used it. In 3D Mark DX11, the 4070 is 11% faster than the 3070. Not a big generational jump. I've also included the ARC integrated graphics score from the Thunderbolt port. TypeSpy DX12 benchmark showed a nicer 19% improvement. ASUS bundles a Gen 4 NVMe drive with pretty good sequential read speeds. Write speeds are lower, but that's usually the case unless the drive is at least 2 terabytes in size. Alright, time for the game tests. Being the nut job I am, I decided to benchmark the ROG NUC at 1080p, 1440p, and 4K for a variety of games and even emulators to see how this gaming mini holds up in today's gaming landscape. All games are at native resolution. That means no DLSS, no dynamic resolution scaling, just native rendering and using at least the high quality preset in each title. Let's start with the esports. Valorant doesn't see a big drop in frame rate as it scales up. It just ends up almost fully utilizing the RTX 4070 GPU at 4K. League of Legends has a large drop in average frame rate at 4K, but it's still a stupidly high frame rate. Counter-Strike 2 also sees a big drop at 4K. Dota 2 held up really well at 1440p, only dropping at 4K again. 1440p is the sweet spot for Forza Horizon 5. Another sharp drop at 4K with Horizon 2. You get some of that console-like frame rate. Ghost of Tsushima has similar results. Just every resolution has a slightly higher frame rate than Horizon 2. Hellblade 2 is completely unplayable at native 4K resolution, and it's not even full screen rendering. Welcome to the next generation.
She's so far from home, from all she's ever known, half drowned and lost in a world still clouded to her eyes.
RoboCop doesn't do too well at 4K either. While Tekken 8 has some frame drops at 4K, but otherwise it holds up 60 FPS pretty well. Tweak a few settings and you'll be good as gold. Now let's check out emulation. Wii U holds above 60 FPS even at 4K on the toughest to emulate title. And an unlocked framerate title like Wipeout only starts really dropping frames at 4K on the PS3 emulator. So I think the conclusion here is that at 1440p, nearly all the games run pretty well, and that's where this mini sits. You'll need to either drop the quality settings, use DLSS or dynamic resolution scaling, or a combination if you want to boost frame rates, or increase to 4K resolution for the performance heavy titles. Video editing on the ASUS ROG NUC is pretty damn awesome. You've got Intel's QuickSync hardware decoding acceleration on top of the Nvidia GPU, and plenty of CPU grunt. It handles my 4K project with ease. The BIOS is an Intel one, same as in the last couple of NUC Enthusiast minis. You can choose fan profiles and power modes or set a custom one. Also, wake on LAN and power failure options are available. The idle power draw result was good. That NUC 12 Enthusiast was probably fixed with drivers and BIOS updates, but it was a messy release when it launched with the first Intel Arc GPU. The inclusion of the 330 watt power supply is strange, as the maximum I pulled during my testing was just 218 watts, way less than the NUC 12 Enthusiast. A full core load still overwhelms the cooling on the ROG NUC, with the CPU eventually hitting 103C and thermal throttling. The good news is that throughout all my testing, the RTX 4070 GPU stayed below its thermal throttling limit. Noise levels really depend on what you're doing. Since I didn't see a big difference in the power modes, I'm going to show you idle, gaming, and full core load. I found the ROG NUC to be quiet enough during gaming, just not as quiet as NUC 11 Phantom Canyon, but that was one of a kind. Unfortunately, I didn't record the numbers at the time. The ROG NUC is not so quiet when the CPU is hammered on all cores. There was no problem keeping the NVMe drive cool, even when I thrashed it. Alright, so let's wrap this one up. The ASUS ROG NUC brings back the NUC Enthusiast, which featured such stellar mini PCs like Hades Canyon and Phantom Canyon. It's good to see a return to an Nvidia graphics card after the unimpressive launch of the last gaming NUC with ARC graphics. Performance is impressive for a mini PC, as you'd expect from the Core Ultra 9 and RTX 4070 combo, and it's power efficient to boot. 3 M.2 Gen 4 NVMe slots gives you plenty of storage capabilities. It comes with a standard NUC 3-year warranty, and yeah, I'm not discussing that hot topic further. Take it as you will. Oh, also, the vertical stand rocks. That being said, the size has increased substantially over the earlier gaming NUCs, almost doubling the NUC 8 and 11 Enthusiast. The power supply is large and seems like overkill. This is a pricey piece of equipment and will no doubt be compared to laptops with similar specs. IO selection isn't very impressive either. Check out Hades Canyon and then be really impressed what a mini almost half the size had packing on the front and rear. So there it is, the ASUS ROG NUC 970, one of the most, if not most powerful gaming minis at 2.5 litres out there. Let me know what you think of it in the comments, and I should be reviewing the NUC 14 Pro Plus soon. So be sure to stay tuned for that one. I'll put it up right here once it's published. Cheers!